Pine Creek National Golf Club, 812 Sinmam. Sabalam. The sun was soft, the fairways pristine, and the silence curated. That kind of wealthy hush that only exists in places where people pay 6 figures to keep the wrong voices out. Harper Lin walked past the clubhouse with a canvas tote slung over her shoulder, the kind you'd take to a farmer's market, not a private golf course. She wore a pale blue linen blouse tucked into cream trousers. No logos, no noise. Her hair was pulled into a loose twist, sunglasses hiding the sharpness behind her calm. Nobody greeted her, not the concierge who glanced up from behind the mahogany desk and immediately looked past her. Not the valet who opened a Bentley door for the man behind her with 2 rings on every finger. And certainly not the 2 assistant pros lingering near the starter booth who paused just long enough to smirk and whisper something about walk-ons and mystery members' wives. She didn't flinch. She rarely did. This wasn't Harper's first time being underestimated, but it might be the first time they would pay for it, ma'am. The voice came from the left, tight-clipped and already defensive. A man in his late 40s wearing a cobalt visor and crisp polo. His name tag read, Greg Tanner, founding member. "You must be a guest of someone," he said. It wasn't a question. Harper gave a polite nod. "I'm here with Elijah. He's warming up on the back range." Greg's eyebrow twitched barely. "Caddie." "Elijah." Harper smiled gently. The same Greg's chuckle was practice the kind men use to brush off what they don't understand. "Look, I'm sure he's a great guy, but caddies can't just bring their friends onto the course." "I understand," she said. And she did. She understood everything, including the list of names in her tote bag typed on embossed letterhead under the header, Pine Creek Sponsorship Discretionary Fund, FY25s. As she stepped onto the practice green, another group of men turned to look. Not just look, scan, measure, inventory. She heard one of them, Troy mutter. Where'd she find those pants? A Goodwill rack. Laughter followed low and mean. Harper dropped her tote on the bench beside the putting green, pulled a ball from her pocket and lined up a soft stroke. It rolled clean and true. Center cup. Not bad for a thrift store swing, she murmured to no one. She wasn't here to impress them. She was here to let them reveal themselves. And by the time they realized what game they were really playing, she'd already won. The driving range was already humming by 8:40 a.m. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, the kind meant to feel expensive. Caddies wheeled leather bags past practice mats, and the pop of Titleists against graphite echoed like polite applause. Harper Lin stood just beyond the ball pyramid at stall 3, one hand resting lightly on the grip of a 7-iron. She wasn't hitting, just watching across the range. Elijah, tall, athletic, steady, lined up his stance on the tee. His form was clean, shoulders square, knees soft grip, natural, not flashy, but pure, the kind of swing that made the ball whistle. He hit a draw that faded beautifully just inside the 150-yard marker. Harper gave him a soft nod. He returned it, eyes calm, focused. It was his warm-up, his moment. Until they arrived, a trio of men strutted up from the valet, drop matching polos, tailored joggers, gold-trimmed visors. You didn't need introductions to know who they were. Greg Tanner, Troy, DeWitt, Dax Lohman, real estate moguls, tech bros with too much time and not enough grace. The kind of men who thought silence was submission and laughter was a license. They weren't there to play golf. They were there to be seen playing golf. Greg spotted Elijah first. "Aw hell, look who got out of the bag room," he called, voice loud enough to stop a backswing 2 bays over. "Did they let you borrow a set? Or is this some charity thing?" Troy added. "Or maybe his girlfriend's footing the tab." He nodded toward Harper. Harper didn't react. She simply looked down at the grip in her hands and rotated it once slowly, like a pianist flexing her fingers before the concert. Elijah turned polite as ever. "Just loosening up, sir." Greg snorted. "Well, don't loosen up too much. We don't want the help thinking they're tour material." Dax grinned. "Hey, Elijah, tell you what, let's make it fun. You get first crack off the tee when we rotate to the back 9. Show us how the staff swings." There was a pause. The air stilled. Elijah, still calm, nodded. "If you like," Greg slapped his shoulder. "Good sport. Maybe we'll throw in a tip if you make it past the ladies' tees." The laughter was ugly. It bounced off manicured hedges and glinted off platinum watches. Harper stepped forward. "Actually," she said softly, "Elijah's a +16 handicap." Greg turned, eyebrows raised. "And you'd be—" "Someone who knows better than to bet against him." She didn't wait for a reply, just walked toward the back path. Her linen shirt fluttered in the breeze. The canvas tote on her shoulder whispered against her hip with every step. Inside it, a folder rested with 7 pages of sponsorship documents, all signed by her, all funding. "This course." Back at the tee, Greg scoffed. "God, I love this place," he muttered. "Best damn zoo in the city." Troy grinned. "Yeah. And today, we get to watch the animals try to swing." They didn't realize the only ones being watched were them. 10:06 a.m. hole. 10 tee box. Pine Creek National. It should have been a clean rotation, a gentleman's game. Instead, it turned into a stage for everything wrong with privilege wrapped in golf cleats. The starter announced pairings without fanfare. Elijah stood at the back, quietly checking yardage on his rangefinder. He wasn't wearing Oakleys or flashy gear, just a charcoal caddie vest and the steady poise of someone who had nothing to prove. That's what made him a threat. "Hey," Greg barked suddenly, "why don't we give Tiger Jr. the honors?" Troy smirked, tossing Elijah a driver. "Let the caddy lead the dance." Harper, seated under a nearby umbrella, didn't speak. She simply lifted her iced tea and watched. Elijah stepped up, eyes locked on the fairway. No fear, no flinch. Greg leaned toward Dax and whispered, "Let's make it interesting." That's when it happened. Troy walked over to the cooler, pulled out a bottle of Perrier, unscrewed it with a flourish, and as Elijah was halfway into his backswing, splashed it across his back. Ice water, right down the spine. The club slipped in Elijah's grip mid-swing, the ball slicing low and left. He exhaled. Muscles coiled. Greg howled with laughter. "Guess hydration throws off your tempo." "Huh?" Dax stepped up, teeing a ball without asking. "You looked a little tight, buddy," he said, lining his shot. "Let me loosen things up for you." And then he swung. Hard. But he wasn't aiming downrange. He turned the club head just enough to intentionally send the ball screaming laterally, straight into Elijah's temple. It struck with a sickening thwack, and Elijah dropped to one knee, hand to his head, blood blooming fast beneath his fingers. Gasps rippled from 2 bays over. Someone shouted for help, Greg still laughing. "Did you see that? Damn, that one drew blood." Troy added hope. "The guy's got insurance." Harper stood. She walked, not ran across the lawn. Her sandals were soft against the turf. When she reached Elijah, she knelt beside him, gently, tilting his chin to check the wound. "You're okay," she said quietly. "You're not alone." Then, with steady fingers, she pulled her phone from her tote and dialed one number. No hesitation. She waited 3 seconds. "Good morning, Chairman Leeds," she said. "This is Harper Lin." Silence fell around them like fog on fairway grass. Even Greg, suddenly pale, caught the shift in atmosphere, because anyone in the golf world who knew the name Chairman Arthur Leeds also knew one more thing. You don't ignore a call from the woman who funds 4 of your top 5 national events. Harper glanced at Greg, eyes calm as lake water. "You just assaulted my caddy," she said. "You're going to find out what a quiet swing can destroy." She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she simply stood and walked toward the clubhouse. The first storm had landed. The next one was about to roar through every boardroom in the country. 10:34 m. Pine Creek National Clubhouse Office. The room was too elegant for chaos. Muted taupe walls, walnut trim, brass fixtures polished to smug perfection. It smelled like leather and lavender, but to Harper Lin, it smelled like opportunity. She stood by the picture window overlooking the 10th hole. Elijah was being tended to by on-site medics. The bleeding had slowed, his pride less so. Behind her, the general manager, a broad man named Fletcher Knox, hovered nervously, his phone half raised, waiting for instruction or mercy. Harper wasn't speaking yet. She was waiting. Timing mattered. She didn't pace. She didn't rattle. She just watched. Then her phone buzzed. She answered in a single clipped breath. "Yes." The voice on the other end was clear, older, and already bracing Ms. Lin. "This is Chairman Leeds. I've cleared my morning," Good Harper said. She didn't yell, didn't fume. She simply delivered 3 sentences, precise, surgical, impossible to misunderstand. "One of your top-tier certified courses allowed an unprovoked assault on a registered caddie in view of witnesses and staff. The offender is still on the grounds, and I'm currently reviewing the full sponsorship agreement between Pine Creek and the National Golf Federation." There was a pause. The kind of pause that lives between disaster and response. Then Chairman Leeds replied, "Say no more. Consider the club's elite status suspended, pending full investigation." Harper hung up. 10:43 a.m. Clubhouse Lounge. Greg was halfway through a cigar and a casual brag when Fletcher Knox approached him with a face like wet concrete. "Mr. Tanner," Fletcher said tightly, "I'm going to need your badge." Greg blinked. "Excuse me, you've been removed from today's tee sheet. Effective immediately. Please vacate the property." Greg stood up, red, spreading up his neck. "You can't be serious. I'm Pine Creek Legacy. Not anymore." Then, as if summoned by tension itself, Harper walked in. Still in that soft linen, still silent. Greg turned, seething. "This is about your caddie. You're going to pull this crap because he took a bad shot." "No," Harper replied. "I'm going to pull this because you took a swing at the wrong person and assumed no one would swing back." She walked past him, didn't look back. 10:59 a.m. Pine Creek Boardroom, a printer word. Documents spilled out. Harper laid out papers across the long mahogany table. They weren't threats, they were facts. A list of all tournaments her family trust co-funded on the PGA Tour. A breakdown of every course under her silent stake. Pine Creek included. A full profile on Elijah, a rising amateur scholarship recipient of the Lin Foundation for Athletic Equity. Then she handed one last page to Fletcher. "Restructure your member policies, or I restructure the board." She smiled politely. "That will be all." Outside, the sun hadn't moved, but everything else had. 11:15 a.m. Pine Creek National Golf Club, Crown Room. The dining room had never been quieter. Napkins were still folded into triangles. Ice clinked politely in glasses. But the men at the tables, the founders, donors, CEOs, had stopped talking because 3 people had just entered, and the room knew one of them. Arthur Leeds, chairman of the National Golf Federation. White hair, dark suit, expression like a closing gavel. Danielle Fox, Secretary General. Sharp eyes, navy blazer posture like authority, carved in steel. And between them, walking with effortless calm, Harper Lin. Still no designer name, still no entourage, just that quiet linen dress, her canvas tote, and a presence that now silenced men who once mocked her. The 3 of them moved to the head of the room like gravity had shifted. Danielle was the first to speak. She placed a single page on the podium, unfolded it, then looked at the crowd. Her voice was not loud, but it didn't need to be, on behalf of the National Golf Federation. "This is a formal notice of immediate suspension of Pine Creek's elite certification and federal PGA funding. This decision follows a confirmed breach of ethical conduct, including the targeted harassment and physical assault of a licensed caddie under the direct patronage of a founding sponsor." She paused. "Let it settle." Then, the sponsor in question, who until today preferred to remain anonymous, has requested that we refrain from naming her in legal filings. But given the behavior exhibited, we feel it appropriate that the membership knows exactly whose goodwill they abused. Danielle turned slightly, nodded toward Harper. Ms. Harper Lin, principal investor behind 4 PGA youth initiatives, co-architect of the Pine Creek Equity Trust, and effective this quarter strategic board advisor for national tournament eligibility. A ripple passed through the room like an earthquake moving under silk. At the back, Troy muttered, "Jesus Christ!" At the front, Greg stood half out of his seat, his face gone colorless. Chairman Leeds stepped forward, now voice grave. This isn't about punishment. This is about memory. Remember who you mocked. Remember who you tried to humiliate. And then remember, the future of this sport doesn't belong to men who measure worth by shoes or surnames. It belongs to people like her. He turned to Harper, and for the first time in 30 minutes, she nodded just once. No speech, no spectacle, just vindication. And a room full of men who finally realized they had laughed at the woman writing their checks. 2 weeks later, Pine Creek National Golf Club. The banner above the front gate was gone, so was the gold-plated plaque that once read, "Founding Members Only." In its place, a temporary sign with plain block lettering, "Closed for internal audit, National Golf Federation Compliance Team, on site." No fanfare, no ceremony, just silence and clipboarded authority. Inside the clubhouse, Greg Tanner sat stiffly in a low-backed leather chair. Across from him, a panel of 4. No cameras, no press, only consequence. At the center sat Danielle Fox, Secretary General, this time in civilian attire. Her gaze was unreadable, her hands folded calmly over the Federation's ethics code binder. "Mr. Tanner," she said, "do you remember what you said on the 10th tee?" Greg swallowed. It was a joke. He knew I was joking. "You struck a man in the head with a golf ball. It wasn't deliberate." Danielle opened a folder. Inside security camera footage. Printed witness statements. A slow-motion still of the ball, leaving Greg's club face turned inside, deliberately slicing. She didn't slide it across the table. She didn't need to. Greg's shoulders fell. It was the culture, he muttered. "You joke around. You push lines." Danielle's voice was steady. Then maybe the culture needs to be replaced. Outside the conference room, the clubhouse was eerily quiet. Most of the staff had been rotated, membership suspended, policies rewritten, but a few things remained unchanged. The course was still lush, the wind still moved through the pines, and Elijah bandaged, but back was at the driving range, teaching a young girl how to line up her swing. Harper stood at a distance beside Danielle, watching. "You sure you don't want your name on the new charter?" Danielle asked softly. Harper smiled faintly. "No, that's not the lesson." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "Then what is?" Harper looked toward the fairway. "That the quiet ones were never asking for permission. We were already building the future while they laughed." Back in the clubhouse lounge, a new frame had been mounted on the wall. A brushed metal plaque. Simple. It read, "Pine Creek National Ethics Reformation Site, 2024. The course doesn't define the player, the swing does, and beside it, in much smaller print, endorsed by the Lin Foundation for Equity in Golf. No headlines, no viral clips, just a culture shifted by a woman they never saw coming. 3 months later, opening ceremony. Lin Youth Invitational. The sun was soft that morning, not blinding but expectant. A white canopy had been erected just off the 18th green at Cypress Ridge, a newly restored course that once sat forgotten on the city's outskirts. Today, it gleamed like second chances. Children in mismatched polos and 2 big cleats huddled near the starter's booth, clutching loaned clubs and paper scorecards. Most of them had never played 9 holes in their lives. Some had never seen a golf course this clean. And yet, they weren't nervous. They were seen because this wasn't just another tournament. This was the first Lin Youth Invitational, a program fully funded by Harper Lin's foundation and launched with one quiet mission: to give the game back to those who had been told it wasn't theirs. On the podium, a lean, smiling man adjusted the mic. Elijah. No longer just a caddie. Now the director of player development for the Lin Foundation. He looked out at the sea of wide eyes and crooked visors, cleared his throat, and said, "I was once told I didn't belong here. But someone saw past my silence. Someone didn't just open the door, she rebuilt the room." He turned slightly, nodding to Harper at the edge of the crowd. Still in linen, still no makeup, still the woman no one saw coming. But today she stood under a banner that read, "Access is legacy, integrity is power." Golf is for all. Later, as kids rushed the fairways with borrowed bags and impossible dreams, Harper walked the edge of the green. She paused near a tree where a young girl sat alone, staring nervously at her tee sheet. Harper crouched. First time, she asked gently. The girl nodded. "I don't have the right shoes," Harper smiled. "That's okay. The course only listens to your swing." She handed the girl a ball marker, old silver, etched with a small H in cursive. "Keep this. Make it lucky." The girl blinked. "Who are you?" Harper didn't answer right away. She just stood, glanced at the open fairway ahead, and said, "Someone who's been where you are," and made sure the story didn't end there. 6 months later. Augusta National VIP Pavilion Masters Week. The air was different here, crisper, quieter, a hush that came not from reverence but expectation. You could almost hear ambition breathing behind every blazer. Harper Lin stood at the edge of the VIP overlook framed by glass and azaleas. Below her, the 12th hole shimmered in the Georgia light like a painting no one was allowed to touch. She wasn't here to be seen. She never was. But that no longer mattered, because by now everyone knew exactly who she was. Beside her stood Miles Bradford, the president of the PGA board, white hair gleaming, holding a tumbler of top-shelf bourbon he hadn't sipped once. His voice was low. "You've made waves, Harper. Quiet ones, the kind that shift coastlines." She said nothing, he continued. "There's concern. The investor consortium in Scottsdale. The legacy board at Torrey Pines. They think you're trying to change the nature of the game." Harper finally looked up. "I'm not changing it, I'm just reminding it who it left behind." Behind her, a group of elite stakeholders chuckled over cigars, not realizing the woman they once whispered about now held voting control over 3 of their tournaments. But Harper wasn't watching them. Her eyes were on the real target, the culture itself, the invisible contracts that told kids like Elijah they didn't belong, the unspoken dress codes, the sideways glances, the rules never written but always enforced. Harper had never aimed to take anyone's place. She aimed to end the game where power sat behind assumptions and build a new one in its place. One stroke at a time. 11:46 a.m. Private meeting, Magnolia Suite. 4 executives sat across from her. 2 were visibly uneasy. 1 was smirking. The last, a woman in her 50s. Sharp eyes, folded arms, just listened. They had called her in to discuss optics. They thought she might compromise. Harper laid one folder on the table. Inside, a proposal. The Lin Equity Mandate. A binding clause to require every PGA-partnered course to maintain accessible youth programs, mentorships for underrepresented athletes, and an anonymous player. Advocacy line. No lip service, no performative brochures, policy or funding pulls. The woman across the table opened it, read the first paragraph, then slowly nodded. The others, they said nothing. Because in that room and across the sport, the realization was dawning. Harper Lin wasn't just the woman who'd been mocked on a tee box. She was the architect of what came next. That evening, back in her suite, Harper received a small envelope slid under the door. No return name. Inside, a photo. A young girl, brown skin, left-handed, swing teeing off with an oversized club on a municipal course in Detroit. No caption. Just one handwritten sentence. "She hit her first par today. She told me she wants to be like you." Harper pressed the card to her chest, and for the first time in months, she let herself feel it. This wasn't about revenge. It never was. This was about redemption. Not hers, but the game's. And she had hit her final stroke exactly where it needed to land.